This is not for the crowd. This is not for those who wish another phrase, another promise, another sentence to hang on the wall. This is an inner teaching for those who have grown weary of trying to make God respond, who have pounded on the door of heaven with words and with tears until not a syllable remained in the throat, and still it seemed as if nothing answered. And I am saying to you very quietly, but with the authority of many years in this work, that you have come to the most sacred edge of prayer. But only if you will listen, not with the outer ear, not with the drum and nerve that want sound and sign, but with the inner ear that does not ask for an object. Do you follow that? Let us name it plainly, so we do not play games with ourselves. You prayed, you listened, you waited, and it felt like nothing. Like a closed heaven, like the line was dead, like a room emptied after the last candle went out. And I am asking you to notice that little word, felt, because that word gives away the whole case. The senses reported a void, and you believed the report. And there is the whole trouble. You are trusting instruments that cannot register spirit, and condemning God for their failure. Do you see that? Now hear the reversal, and please, if only you will listen with that inner ear, the one that does not need a sentence to be sure of life. The silence you met was not God refusing you. There is no such thing as God refusing you. There is not any closed heaven. There is only the one presence always being itself. And when the senses for a breath lose their dominance, the old noise ceases, and what remains to the human ear is called silence. But to spiritual sense, it is the very thunder of silence, the living announcement that you have touched a realm the five senses cannot measure. And so to them, it looks like nothing, while to the soul, it is everything. I tell you again, the five senses are faithful reporters of dust and distance and time. But they are not equipped to weigh the infinite. And when they finally tire and drop their testimony, you will feel, there is that word again, you will feel as if nothing is happening. And that is when the hypnotism is thinning, the spell of appearance is losing the right to tell you what God is like. And if in that very moment you rush back to sound, to signs, to outcomes, you step out of the sanctuary and re-enter the marketplace of fear. Do you follow that? So set your expectation aright at the door. This is not about getting more words from God. This is not about manufacturing a message or arranging an outward token to soothe the nerves. This is about recognizing the presence that remains when words cease. The I that is before language. The life that is before breath. And if you can consent, just consent to that quiet, you will know that prayer has not failed at all. Prayer has finished its noise and opened into awareness. And in that awareness, there is only one presence and one power, and no opposite. And because there is no opposite, there is nowhere for God to be absent from. If you will sit in that, if you will let the inner ear attend and the outer ear rest, if you will refuse to take the sense report as final, you will discover that the so-called unanswered prayer was the first true answer you have ever received. For it removed the craving for a reply and left you with God. And that is the answer. And everything necessary is included in that answer, if only you will listen. Now let us look straight at the manufacturer of absence, because there is only one error, and that error is hypnotism. Suggestion accepted as fact. The five senses whispering their report and you believing it. Do you see that? There is not hypnotism and an absence of God. There is only hypnotism appearing as a picture of absence. In other words, The instrument that cannot measure spirit declares, "No spirit here." And you, trusting the instrument, accept the verdict. And then you pray again for a voice or a sign to convince the instrument. And there is the folly. Do you follow that? Silence becomes frightening only when you have ordained the senses as your priests. They want a voice they can record, a sign they can photograph, a feeling they can tingle with, a sudden change in conditions they can tally. And if none comes, they rule against God. And you, if you are hypnotized, accept the ruling. You say, God did not answer. But the truth is, the senses made a report on a realm they cannot touch. Do you understand that? As long as you are judging by appearances, you must conclude that God is absent whenever appearances do not shift. But the moment you stop judging by appearances, absence has no evidence to stand on. It has no witness, no court, no jury. It evaporates like the water on the road that never was water. Do you follow that? Picture the hypnotist who says, "Snakes are coiled in that fern." And the subject jumps and screams and calls for a stick and a savior, and you could knock down every fern in the hall, and still more snakes would appear, because you have not removed anything. You have only chased pictures. The only cure is to break the spell. Get hypnotized, do you see? So it is with the feeling, God is not answering. You can demand 10 signs, 20 sensations, 100 shifted circumstances, and the day the senses report nothing, you are back to the old terror. Because the God you sought was a God verified by nerve and noise, a God that lives or dies by your 5 reporters. If you seek God through sense evidence, you will always be vulnerable to the hour the instruments fall silent, and they will, and thank heaven they will, for that is the very moment the inner teaching begins. But if you rush back to instruments, you will miss the announcement. The sense of absence is itself sense testimony, not spiritual fact. There is no such thing as God being absent. There isn't any place for God to be absent from. There is only one presence and one power and one life and one mind. And anything that says otherwise is the mirage of hypnotism telling you to wet your lips at desert water. Do you follow that? In other words, the pain of abandonment is not a message from God. It is a symptom of trusting an organ that cannot weigh infinity. And the remedy is not to get more noise, nor to paint the sky with signs, but to withdraw the authority you gave to appearances, so that silence may change its meaning in you. Listen with your inner ear. Let the outer ear rest. Refuse the verdict of nothing happening, and you will discover that what seemed like absence was only the senses going off duty. And in their recess, the presence stands revealed, not as sound to a drum, but as certainty to the soul. And once you taste that, the day the senses report nothing will be the day you relax. Do you see that? Because you will know the infinite has never entered a measurement and never needed one. Let us bring the desert into the room. Because if only you will listen, you will see this whole mystery in a single picture. You are driving on a hot day, and there, glittering on the road, you see water. You feel dry. You feel urgent. You press the pedal. You chase, and the water stays just beyond the bumper. And you can pursue it to the horizon and never wet your lips because there is no water there. There never was. It is a mirage. Do you follow that? Now listen with your inner ear. Prayer that hunts for an outer reply is doing precisely that. It is pressing the pedal toward a result on the asphalt of appearance. And when the pictured water does not materialize, you conclude that God withheld. But God never entered that chase and never placed water there. Only the heat on the senses painted a shimmer. Do you see? In other words, silence feels empty only to the one chasing a second power. Yes, that is the word you must hear today. Two powers. God on one side and condition on the other. Spirit and matter. Truth and problem. And you are waiting for God to throw a rock into the pond so you can hear a splash and say, "Ah, now I know." But there is no pond, and there is no rock, and there is not a second power. There is only one presence and one power and one life and one mind. And there isn't any opposite for it to fight. There isn't any. As long as you believe in two powers, you must read silence as delay, as denial, as absence. Because your premise requires an event, a sign, a measured contest. But the moment you accept one presence, you discover there is nowhere for God to come from, nowhere for God to go to, nowhere for God to be missing from. Do you follow that? So turn the logic right side up. If God is omnipresent, then silence cannot be a gap in God. It cannot be a vacuum of love. It can only be a gap in the mirage, a cessation of the noise you depended on, the splash you demanded from a pond that never existed. And if you can bear 2 minutes of that recognition, you will feel the strange relief that comes when the chase stops. You are not being punished. You are not being ignored. You are being weaned from the hypnotism that spirit must show up as an effect, as a goose flesh, as a swift change of scene. And thank heavens for that weaning, because until it happens, you will live by weather and nerves. Do you see now why the silence that used to frighten you can become the sweetest assurance? Because when the picture noise thins out, presence is not added. Presence is noticed. Presence is what was here when the glitter fooled you. You have not made God arrive. You have allowed the second power myth to depart, and with it goes the emptiness. For there never was an empty God. There was only an empty belief in appearances. So the next time the mind says nothing is happening, answer it with the truth that nothing of the mirage is happening, and everything of God is. And rest in that, and you will find the road dry and your thirst gone without a mile more of chasing. Do you understand? Now let us unmask the little beggar hidden inside most prayer. Because if only you will listen with your inner ear, you will see how cleverly it hides. It sounds so reverent. God, speak so that my condition changes. But buried in that sentence is the confession that the condition is your God. The condition is the authority. The condition is the pointer by which you read presence or absence. Do you see that? That is the bargain. I will believe you are here when the picture shifts. And that is hypnotism. There is only one error, and that is hypnotism. The acceptance of appearances as power. And you can dress it in holy words, and it remains the same demand for an effect, for an outcome, for a sign you can tabulate. As long as prayer is a tactic to move pictures you are in material meta, you are treating effects, and you cannot win because you cannot cure a disease there isn't any. You cannot cure lack there isn't any. You cannot correct fear there isn't any. You cannot fix silence there isn't any absence. There is only hypnotism appearing as these pictures. Do you follow that? Treat one effect and 2 more will spring up. Scrap one worry and a subtler one takes its place. Because you have not touched cause. You have not rested in the one presence and the one power and the one life and the one mind. You have merely rearranged furniture in a dream. Now watch what happens the instant you declare silence to be a problem. You rush to correct it. You strain. You multiply technique. You count minutes and mantras and breaths. You bargain. If I hold longer, if I concentrate harder, You must answer. And the strain becomes the new proof that God is far. The clock becomes the new judge. The very effort thickens the static, and you say, "See, there is nothing." Do you see why the mind's demand for a message is the very thing that blocks hearing? You are trying to force spirit to enter nerve. You are insisting that the infinite become a sensation on cue. And when that sensation does not appear, you indict God. But you have only heard your own machinery. In other words, prayer is not mental effort. Prayer is not pushing. Prayer is not the personal mind engineering a method and dictating a timing. Prayer is receptivity. Prayer is the yielding of the sense of me that wants to manage God as if God were an event. Do you follow that? The ear must be emptied of its own story before it can register silence as presence. The heart must cease bargaining before it can rest in omnipresence. The will must stop making appointments with God before it can find that there is nowhere for God to come from, and no hour in which God arrives. Think of the radio when the hand trembles on the dial. You can order the symphony to play louder. You can shake the box. You can scold the station. And all you will increase is static. Only when the hand becomes still does the music that was already there come clear. You have not brought it. You have ceased to blur it. So it is with prayer. Cease treating effects. Refuse the urge to fix silence. Put down the mental tools and consent to be still. And the presence that needed no improvement will announce itself. Not as an outcome to flatter the senses, but as peace that ends the chase. And then whatever form is needed is included, added, inevitable. Because there is only one demonstration, and that is God realized. Do you see that? Now here is the simple, absolute, unqualified statement that may save you years if you will listen with your inner ear. There is only one way you can be DEH hypnotized. And that is when the 5 physical senses are quiet, not improved, not persuaded, not bribed with holy feelings. Quiet. Do you follow that? As long as they hold court and hand down verdicts about God, about time, about conditions, you will live on their testimony and call it reality. And you will wait for God to submit himself as Exhibit A to satisfy a juror that was never competent to judge spirit. Do you see that? The inner pivot is not to strain for God. The inner pivot is to stop listening to the senses about God. In other words, you do not reach for a voice. You release the commentator. You let the reporter fold his paper. You let the photographer put away the flash. And in that recess, what you called silence is no longer a blank. It is presence without performance. It is certainty without sentence. And while it may carry no emotion and no word at all, it carries what nothing in this world can counterfeit. It carries, I am. To the nerves, it is nothing. To spiritual sense, it is everything. And you will know the difference because fear pauses without argument, and need relaxes without evidence. Do you follow that? Now take this down inside yourself, step by step. And this is practice, not poetry. First, stop asking. Yes, stop the request, even the holy kind, because asking keeps you at the surface where outcomes rule. Second, rest. Let the breath be natural. Let the shoulders drop. Let attention unhook from the problem and also from the wish for a sign. Third, let thought settle. Do not decorate it. Do not police it. Simply refuse to ride any sentence to a conclusion about God. Fourth, refuse to measure. No clock, no pulse-taking of peace, no testing of how deep am I? Because measurement is the old priest of sense testimony. Fifth, Acknowledge omnipresence, quietly, without strain, not to persuade God to come, but to remind yourself there is nowhere for God to come from. Sixth, wait without a stopwatch. Be available, not insistent. Be present, not hunting. And if a minute is given, take a minute. If 5 are given, take 5. But make no treaty with time. Do you see that? You will hear the mind say, "You are doing nothing." And you must recognize that voice as the hypnotist itself, because it was the same mind that demanded a feeling and called silence absence. And I tell you, there is no such thing as absence in omnipresence. There isn't any. This nothing is the open door. This nothing is the thunder of silence. This nothing is the only atmosphere in which the invisible becomes evident to itself as your very being, not as an added event, but as the ground that was here before events. Stay there, and you will discover that guidance does not need syllables to be sure. Supply does not need figures to begin. Safety does not need fences to be felt. The senses quiet, and what changes is not God, but the meaning of quiet itself. So do not hurry from this room within you. Do not argue with it. Do not importune it. Let the 5 reporters go off duty and refuse their summaries, and you will find that silence speaks fluently the one language there is, the language of presence. And in that language, nothing is missing. Nothing is late, and nothing needs to be proved. Do you understand? Now that you have let the reporters go off duty, and you have sat in that room without bargaining, the question rises, but how shall I know what to do? And I must say to you very directly, if only you will listen with your inner ear, that guidance is not a sound, and not a spectacle, and not a rush of emotion. There is no such thing as God needing volume to be real. There isn't any. Do you follow that? The most dependable answer you will ever receive will not arrive as fireworks for the nerves. It will come as the vanishing of the fear that drove the question. And in that vanishing, you will find yourself standing quietly at a doorway you did not plan, and the hand will reach for the knob without debate. And you will call, or you will not call. You will go, or you will stay. And afterward, you will notice that there was no argument in it, only a simple rightness. Do you see that? In other words, the answer is a change in consciousness, not first a change in circumstances. The pressure lifts, and the sight clears. And then the outer picture rearranges as effect because it has no choice in the presence of realized cause. When you demand the picture first, you are back in material meta, measuring God by motion, and you will say, nothing happened, while the most vital thing in the universe is happening. The spell is breaking. The self that needed a sign is thinning out. And where it stood, there is presence felt as peace. Do you understand? This is why you have sometimes risen from prayer with no message, and yet within an hour, the seemingly impossible door opened. Because you did not pry it. The atmosphere shifted, and the door had to swing. Now learn the taste of voices, so you are not fooled. The personal mind is urgent, insistent, noisy with reasons and deadlines and consequences. It argues, it threatens, it flatters, and always it hurries you. And I tell you, that is the hypnotist speaking. That is not God. Do you follow that? The movement that rises in inner stillness is never coercive. It does not sell itself. It does not plead a case. It is quiet. It is simple. Sometimes it is a restraint. Not now. Sometimes it is a nudge. This way. And sometimes it is nothing you can name at all except the sudden absence of compulsion. And in that absence, Your feet know the step. Do you see why the truest answer may not speak in sentences at all? And please hear this, because it will save you from many disappointments. When you drag a clock into prayer, you have returned to hypnosis. Time is a sense category. Time belongs to the 5 reporters, and they are off duty. Do you understand that? There is no such thing as a late God. There is no such thing as not yet in omnipresence. There isn't any. There is realization, or there is the dream of delay. And the moment realization dawns, the measurement loses meaning, even before the calendar flips. And then, in due form, the picture follows as shadow follows substance. If you say, "It has been 3 days and still no answer," you have admitted your premise. You are seeking events to certify God, and you will miss the whisper that requires no certification. So sit, let the fear dissolve, let the argument cease, and watch how life moves of itself when the self that pushes is quiet. You will find the phone rings at the right second, the word forms in the mouth without strain. The door that needs to stay closed simply does not tempt you, and the door that needs to open finds your hand without rehearsals. No voice, yet guidance. No drama, yet direction. No promise spelled out in syllables, yet a certainty that does not tremble. Because there is only one presence and one power and one mind being itself as your knowing. This is the answer that comes first as peace and then as form. This is the formless guidance that dissolves fear before it rearranges events. And if only you will listen with your inner ear, you will not miss it. Do you see that now we come to the great reversal? And I must ask you to listen with your inner ear, because this is the hinge on which all of this swings. There is only one life, and that life is God. There is only one mind, and that mind is God. There is only one soul, and that soul is God. There is only one spirit, and that spirit is God. There is only one law, and that law is God. Do you see how that removes the possibility of separation? If there is only one, there is not another over here waiting for an answer from a God over there. There isn't any over there. There is no opposite, no outside, no elsewhere. And therefore, there can be no gap to cross and no silence to span. Do you follow that? God is silent. That sentence can only trouble you if you first believe in 2 powers, in 2 presences, in 2 lives, in a you that must signal across a distance to reach an unwilling deity. But if there is only one, then what you call silence is not God withholding. It is the fiction of distance dissolving. It is the last echo of the belief in two-ness dying out. And your nerves, trained to read events, call that death nothing, do you see? You say, "I cannot hear," and I tell you there is no such thing as a you apart from hearing, and a God apart from being heard. There is only awareness aware of itself. And the drama of a dialogue between 2 ends when oneness is accepted. And with it ends the fear of quiet. Because quiet has no opposite to fear. Now take this home to the heart. The very capacity in you that notices silence is already awareness. And awareness is not a product of sense testimony. It is not nerves, not ears, not clocks. It is the light by which any of these are known. And when that awareness is cleansed of fear, and it is cleansed by the simple recognition of one presence, it becomes the doorway through which presence reveals itself, not as a message to someone else, but as I am being I am. Do you follow that? You have been trying to get a sound to certify God, but the witness who wants certification is a shadow of the old two-power belief. Let it relax, let it drop, and the silence that frightened it will be recognized as God being God without an opposite. This is why we must move from saying, "I believe in God," which leaves a believer over here and a believed in over there, to the simple fact, I rest in God. I rest in the One, and resting, I do not require tokens. I do not require a tremor in the body or a shift in the scene to be sure, because One requires no proof to itself. Do you understand? The wave does not beg proof of ocean. The branch does not demand a sign from tree. The ray does not ask the sun to speak. They rest in what they are. And so must you rest. And as you rest, you will find that your former prayer did not fail. It matured. It stopped bargaining for outcomes and entered abiding in presence. So let the great relief come. Let it stabilize. The next time the mind whispers, "God is silent," answer gently, "There is no such thing as God being absent. There isn't any place for God to be absent from. There is only one presence, and it is here. And here is not geography, but awareness itself." Sit in that, and you will notice that quiet is no longer a verdict. It is a sanctuary. It is the atmosphere of one in which fear has nothing to cling to. And from that abiding, as surely as shadow follows substance, whatever form is needed appears without your pleading, because one cannot contradict itself. Do you see that? Do you follow that? Now hear this, and listen with your inner ear, because this is not poetry and not comfort alone. It is law. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Do you see that? Seek first is not a pious suggestion. It is the physics of spirit. It is how reality functions. And as long as you try to reverse the order, outcomes first, God later, you remain in the mirage chasing the glitter. There is only one demonstration, and that is the realization of God. There isn't any other. The rest is not a series of little victories, but the natural inclusion that follows when substance is known. In other words, stop demonstrating a reply and begin demonstrating God. Stop hunting a sign to lift fear and let presence dissolve fear. And then signs, if needed, appear of themselves. What is this added? Because you must be very clear, added is not a prize for effort, not a wage for hours of devotion, not a chip you cash in. Added means the form that corresponds to realized presence shows up as effect. Health, supply, reconciliation, direction. These are not trophies. They are the forms that substance takes when substance is known. Do you follow that? Think of mahogany. If you have the wood, you do not beg for a table. The table is included in the nature of mahogany. When you know God as the one presence and power, you do not bargain for safety or guidance. They are included in omnipresence. They cannot be absent where cause is realized. So the work is never to wring a message from silence. The work is to stand still in God until silence is recognized as presence. And then whatever belongs to presence appears, because there is no second power to forbid it. Now watch how the mind tricks you. It says, "Nothing was added today. I heard no word." And I tell you, that may be the very hour the order was being corrected in you. The kingdom first. Do you see that? The quiet that felt like delay may have been the hand removing your grasp from forms so that substance could be touched. And once substance is touched, the hands are free. The fear is gone, and forms come without strain. As long as you chase a reply, you are chasing a picture. As soon as you recognize God, You are resting in what makes pictures inevitable and effortless. This is why we have said again and again, you cannot treat effects and win. Two more will rise to take their place. But abide in cause, and effects cannot help but align. Please notice the relief embedded in this law. You do not have to engineer outcomes. You do not have to coerce events. You do not have to search the horizon for a sign. You have only to refuse the hypnotism of appearances and rest in one. Seek first, not second. God realized, not message obtained. Presence known, not nerves persuaded. And then added means added. The call arrives at the right moment. The reconciliation that seemed impossible becomes ordinary. The direction stands up inside you without debate. The body that trembled forgets to tremble. Not by your pushing, but by the simple fact that shadow follows substance. Do you see why the search for the message is secondary and the realization of God is primary? Take this into your practice, 5 minutes, 10, as you are led, and stop asking silence to produce a token. Let silence unveil the kingdom, and watch how the forms that once consumed you line up like obedient shadows to the sun that never moved. Now let us come to the place where theory either becomes life or it dissolves, because anyone can rest in quiet when the sky is clear. But the hour that proves you is the hour of diagnosis, of loss, of conflict, of the figure that says insufficient. And in that hour, hypnotism shouts. The 5 reporters pound their desks and demand that you bow to their headline. And if only you will listen with your inner ear, you will discover that what we have called silence is not emptiness at all. It is the one safe chamber where you do not take orders from noise. Do you see that? In calm, silence is pleasant. In crisis, silence is offensive to the senses because it refuses to panic. It refuses to supply adrenaline to a picture. And yet, that is precisely why it is salvation. Because there is no such thing as safety in reaction. There isn't any. So here is your in-the-moment work, and I want you to memorize it, because when the report comes, there is no time for theology, only for truth. The phone rings. The test result is read. The letter lands. The face scowls. And before you answer a syllable within or without, you stand still inside, and you refuse authority to the report. You do not fight it. You do not decorate it. You do not improve it. You simply know within yourself there is only one presence and one power and one life and one mind. And this report is not a second power. Do you follow that? You may even say quietly right where you are, "Thank you for your message," to the appearance. But add within, "You have no law. You have no cause. You have no selfhood. There is only God being God." And you rest there, even for 10 seconds that are honest. And in that instant, you have stepped out of the spell because you have refused to be a reactor. Healing takes place in proportion to your reaction to the appearance. The less you react, the more you behold. The more you behold, the less there is to heal. Because you cannot cure a condition, there isn't any. You can only awaken from a suggestion that parades as condition. Do you see that? Non-reaction is not coldness. It is not stoicism. It is the recognition that the picture cannot dictate terms to spirit. It cannot force omnipresence to split itself into threat and rescue. And the moment you withdraw your consent to be managed by the picture begins to lose its support. The lines of fear slacken. The timing of panic dissolves. and you find the breath that belongs to you because it belongs to God. Now understand this thoroughly so you are not cruel to yourself. You are not denying human feelings. You are denying their power to define reality. In other words, the wave may throw spray on the face, but it does not alter the ocean. And a feeling that rises does not alter God. Do you follow that? Let the sensation be what it is, without handing it the keys. You may feel the tremor. You may hear the voice of alarm in the body, and still you can know. You are a weather report, not a law. And rest the attention again in the one. And the weather will pass because it had no substance to begin with. There isn't any. And please do not confuse this with passivity. It is not passivity. It is alignment. It is the stillness that refuses the counterfeit so that right action, which is included in presence, can present itself without argument. From that inner quiet, you may call a doctor or a lawyer or a friend. You may drive or you may wait. You may speak or you may be silent. But you will not be hustled by fear. You will be moved by peace. And that difference is all the difference. Do you see that? Action that rises from panic breeds more pictures to fix. Action that rises from omnipresence carries no aftertaste. It fulfills itself because it is not trying to prove God. It is God expressing as the simple next. So train for the hour of fear in the small minutes of every day. But when the hour comes, do not search for speeches. Take 30 honest seconds. Drop your shoulders. Let the senses go off duty. Acknowledge one presence here, one power here, one life here. This report is not a second power. And wait, not for a sign, but until the knot loosens. And then move as led. If you cannot wait 30, take 10. If you cannot take 10, take 3. But take them wholly. And in that wholly given pause, the spell breaks enough for the dehypnotized step to appear. And as surely as shadow follows substance, the needed form will stand up in its time. Because in crisis, as in calm, the work is not to force God to speak. The work is to refuse the report's claim to be power, while you abide in omnipresence. And in that abiding, you will find there is no such thing as absence. There isn't any. Do you see that? Do you follow that? Now comes the quiet assignment. And I must ask you not to let this get stale. Do not let today's clarity become tomorrow's slogan. Take it as maintenance, as bread, as air. Return to it daily, not as information, but as practice. Because nothing in this work is kept by memory. It is only kept by realization. And realization requires showing up. Do you see that? If only you will listen with your inner ear, you will find that 5 honest minutes given to presence are worth more than 50 pages of notes. Because the mind loves notes, loves outlines, loves to collect phrases. But the mind does not love to surrender. And surrender is the doorway. Surrender is the stillness in which the senses go off duty and the one presence announces itself without a sign. So set a simple rhythm and let it be gentle. First thing, before your feet touch the floor. Now watch for the counterfeit, because it will come with holy words. The mind will demand constant reassurance. Prove it again and again. It will check your temperature of peace. It will ask for a sign to confirm a sign. And I tell you, there is no such thing as spiritual insecurity in God. There isn't any. That demand is hypnotism, not sensitivity. Do not fight it, and do not feed it. Smile at it. Thank it for announcing itself, and answer within, you have no law. You have no cause. You have no selfhood. There is only God. And return to quiet. In other words, Every time you catch that beggar at the door, you are already being de-hypnotized, because the catching is awareness, and awareness is presence recognizing itself. Do you see that? As you keep this little rule, silence will change its meaning, and you will notice the most practical fruits. Not prophecy, not fireworks, but a steadiness that does not hunt for proof. Decisions that rise without argument. A kindness toward yourself and others that requires no effort. Fears that forget to dress up as facts. You will walk into rooms that used to unnerve you and feel no opposite there to contest God. You will face tasks that used to demand luck and find order without strain. Because you are not proving anything anymore. You are abiding. And abiding, you discover there is no such thing as separation. There isn't any. So make this your daily covenant. Keep it simple and keep it alive. Be still. Refuse measurement. Remember one. Release outcomes. And do it again tomorrow. Not as toil, but as homecoming. Meditate and ponder this. Listen with your inner ear until it is natural to say without effort, I and the Father are one presence. And let that sentence rest you more than any answer. And then watch, quietly, how as surely as shadow follows substance, the added forms take care of themselves, because the substance is realized. Blessings and aloha.